Okay, so welcome everybody. Yeah, it's great to be here again for step one, the first official step of the 12-step group. My name is Robby, and I live in Abbotsford, British Columbia. And yeah, it's my privilege to kind of walk through and kind of highlight the key elements of each of the 12 steps. So we're going to jump into that now. The goal of this greater step study is to demystify each of these 12 steps. It's a program that was created many years ago, originally by Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's been adapted over the years to support various addictions, one of which being sexual addiction. So the 12-step workbook that we are using, and there are many of them, but the one we're using is called the Steps to Freedom workbook. And this is what it kind of looks like. There's many different types of them, but this is just the one that we currently like to use. So the so just for some goals here, my goal for today is to give you a snapshot of what step one is all about. I'm going to invite you, if you want to at least, to crack the book while we're even meeting here and familiarize yourself with it. The whole goal of doing this is just that you feel empowered and kind of able to go through the book in your own time. So yeah, that's the main purpose. Steps to Freedom is an imperfect book. There's nothing particularly magical or special about the exact questions that are written in here, but the whole goal is to lead you on a path towards accomplishing what is necessary in that step. So there can be lasting life change that can come through doing this. And really, each of us gets out of this what we put into it. So there is some work involved with doing the steps well. I would just encourage generally from the outset to treat this step book as a journal. So write everything in it. I really find, especially when you're sharing it with somebody else, it's much better. You stay much more on topic if you write out in full sentences exactly what your answer is. It also encourages you to be brief and succinct instead of going on and on and on and monologuing. So use the space that's provided for each question and write in your answers in the book and then kind of leave it at that. So step one, what is step one all about? So just to read the step out loud, it is, we admitted that we were powerless over our addictions and compulsive behaviors, that our lives had become unmanageable. In another recovery group that I attend, we actually put Bible verses to each of the 12 steps to kind of give them some biblical, I guess, backbone to kind of back them up. So the passage that we use that we think most compares to step one is Romans 7:18, which says, I know that nothing good lives in me, that is, in my sinful nature, for I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. And really that speaks to the fact that, like, we know when we're doing wrong. We have conviction in our lives when we're engaged in pornography, masturbation, whatever. But we just find ourselves trapped in it. At least at a certain point, when it becomes a true addiction, it's almost like we no longer have the option. So that step really gives a good synopsis of what it's all about. So you'll notice that in that first 12 step, there is no usage of the word I. It always says we. So it says we because in the 12-step program, the whole entirety of it is meant to be worked in community. It is not meant to be done in isolation. And if we do isolate during the 12-step process, it's highly, highly unlikely that you will ever actually finish it. And even if you did, if you had enough kind of self-grit and determination that you did, you won't get the most out of it that you would if you shared that with another person, at least one other person, if not a whole group of people. So step one is the most foundational step that we really need to learn at the outset of 12 steps. Really, each step builds on the next one. So if we don't get this one, we're not going to get the next 11 that kind of come after it. So the purpose of step one is to strip off any last lingering thoughts that you might have or that we might have that leads us to think that we might be able to fix ourselves. That's really the whole goal. Like it's to destroy that idea that, oh, if I work just a little bit harder, maybe I could do this all on my own. That's the whole idea that we're really trying to fight here. So the hard truth is that we all need to believe that if left to our own devices, we will always be in bondage, and that we all need, we'll all be in bondage to the addiction that we now experience. If we don't believe this, then it's really impossible to complete the next 11 steps, because it really is, it's a dependent step. It's us claiming, like, God, I don't have the strength on my own. You do. Give me that power to actually complete this recovery journey and to become, not in bondage anymore. So the whole idea is to strip that away. So a few of the goals of step one, firstly, admit powerlessness. That's huge. Like we need to be able to say out loud and to God and to ourselves, all three of those people, I am powerless. Like at this point, I've tried all my own devices. I've tried all my own ways and I've got nothing. Left to my own devices, I'm just going to keep doing this. So admitting powerlessness is the first huge goal of step one. It's also meant to create humility. It's meant to put us in our proper place in comparison to God. Like we no longer have the strength. We've put ourselves in a place where we're now completely in bondage. And so we need God to bring us out of that place. So it creates humility. Thirdly, it also is meant to help us to adopt an attitude of complete dependence on God. We can no longer, put ourselves as God in some way or think that we have the power in our own lives. And we have to stop trying to control things and let go of our self-image. For a lot of addicts, I think there, at least for myself, like I have a very strong desire to control things in my own life and in other people's life and those around me, the things that affect me, I want to have control over. But really this whole step is to let go of that control and say, God, like, I don't have control of this. Please take over, take the wheel kind of thing. And let go of your self-image. Part of this too, if we've been caught by our loved ones doing things that are sexually deviant, that break us down, there's going to be, at least to some extent, like a damaging of our reputation in the eyes of other people. And that's actually key to this. Not that we want to go around like lambasting ourselves, but like there does need to be like a giving to God, a surrendering to God of our self-image, of saying like, oh, this is how I want to be perceived by the world. But really that just keeps us in a state of not being open and honest with others around us. So we have to let go of our self-image in that regard. There's a quote that I've heard before, and I really agree with it. Only when your pain is greater than your fear will you be ready to honestly take the first step, admitting that you are powerless and your life is unmanageable. So really, and maybe even in this room or people listening to this in the future, you may be in a place where you don't have that pain yet. You haven't come to a place in your life where, there's been a huge disturbance because you've been found out or you've come clean to somebody, and there's the pain is leading you to want to change. But for many people, and I know for me, for many years, like people might have told me like, Robby, this isn't a good path, or they might have caught me in small ways, but it didn't affect me much. And the pain wasn't there until it was at such a place where I really realized that I couldn't handle it anymore. So if we admit we are powerless and that we need a power greater than ourselves to restore us, and that power, that higher power for us is Jesus Christ. And that is hope. Like the whole step one is to kind of break us down a little bit. But the important news is to know that step two is all about putting that hope and putting that power in Jesus Christ, who we identify at least as that higher power that can get us through. So while it may seem like a really harsh, heavy step, it's meant to get us to a place, but then not let us stay there. We're not meant to stay in this place of hopelessness and feeling completely downtrodden. We're meant to get past that, but a part of that recovery and even emotional journey is to get to a place of feeling emotionally broken. So that's what step one is meant to do. So I wanted to actually pull out the book and kind of go over a couple questions. I read through the step one. I went back through the work that I had done, and there was a few questions that I wanted to highlight because I thought they might be helpful for others. They may find the question difficult or confusing. So if you want to open your book while I'm reading this, you're welcome to. But I'm going to be on the first one is on page 9 of the Steps to Freedom workbook. And it's under a heading called Admitted. And it's the first kind of question after that. And it says, admitted means to acknowledge what already is a fact. We need to admit before we can become and stay clean. In step one, what are you trying to admit to yourself that is probably a known fact to others? So really, it's kind of like taking away or stripping away that, again, the self-image that we've had that leads us to think that we're not known or people can't see the effects of addiction in our lives. So for me, the 3 things that I wrote down, because there's 3 blank spaces, was that I have an addiction to lust and sexual addiction, that I am always one poor action away from relapse, and that I do not have the strength on my own to resist temptation. So perhaps that's a question that would have been hard for somebody to kind of answer. And so I wanted to kind of give, my response to that, to try and give a bit of an example of how that question could be answered, but it'll be based on you, obviously. 2 more questions that I thought were worthy of just kind of highlighting a little bit. On page 10, there is a question, the third one down, that says, over what particular sexual behaviors are you admitting that you are currently powerless? I said lusting over women, fantasizing about alternative realities, such as past relationship choices I could have made or things that I could have said or done. The third one was masturbation in the past. And the fourth was looking at pornography. So these are things that I had to admit to God that, yeah, God, I can't control these things on my own. Like, these are areas that I need you to take ownership of, that I no longer can own, because they're, I just don't make smart choices, and I don't have control in these areas. And then the final question that I wanted to highlight was on page 12 of the workbook. And it's the first question that appears on the page, which says, what benefits do you see in being powerless over your sexual addiction? So for me, I wrote in the first 4 blank spaces, firstly, it is a relief in some ways to know that I can't save myself. It's kind of an outsourcing of, not responsibility, but it's kind of like putting that on God, and like, God, I'm giving this to you. There's almost a relief that comes with that when you kind of let that go and give it to God. Secondly, it teaches me to rely on God. Thirdly, it leads me to spend time with those who are on a similar journey. So yeah, those are benefits that technically I would not have received if I hadn't admitted that I was powerless and tried to, and realized that I needed God's help in these areas. So those are just 3 that kind of came to my mind that I thought would be worthwhile just highlighting, and maybe they would be confusing to others. And so I wanted to give examples of how I answered them. So just a couple more things. Just be prepared with this book for repetitive questions asked in slightly different ways. It's done purposely, but it can be quite frustrating. So you'll see a question that's written in a particular way, and then the next page over, you'll see almost the same question worded slightly different. And kind of like repeating things, kind of like how certain, phrases are repeated in the Bible. That's a purposeful thing that's been done to try and just get this point home. So just know ahead of time, you're going to see that. Just resign yourself to it, answer the question anyway, and keep going. Don't get stuck on it. So just a couple of questions on suggestions for going ahead and doing this work. Again, I would encourage setting a regular time twice per week to work on this. I believe this particular step is about 10 or 11 pages in the workbook. So if you do 2 pages per session, that'll get you done in the month. But it's going to be up to you, obviously, how you want to do that. Put a star beside the 7 questions that you feel were really confronting to you, or ones that were kind of an epiphany moment for you. You kind of learned something about yourself. And especially if there's any questions that you don't want to share with somebody else, that's exactly the questions that you need to share with your sponsor. And then make sure you share those and read them out exactly as you wrote them down when you're meeting with your sponsor. The goal, again, is to complete these steps, in our case, with the group that's originally watching this, in a 3 to 4 week period, so that we can move on to step 2 in the next month. And again, just keep going. Don't stop. The worst thing you can do is to get stuck. So just keep moving. Like, just, the worst thing that often affects people the first time or 2 they do the steps is they just get stuck, and they kind of either they think they have to do a perfect job, or they do just a slap and dash job that isn't very good. Like, try and stick in the middle. Don't let yourself get to that point where you're like, I have to do perfect, or else I'm not going to move on. Don't get stuck in that. And finally, just an encouragement about sponsors, and then we'll wrap up. So for me, it's always essential when I've done the steps to have one. At the end of the day, it's your recovery journey. It's whatever you want. So it's up to you. I know it can be hard to find a sponsor too, and so I can empathize with that. But again, in terms of looking for that person, to find someone in recovery that you look up to, and just ask them if they'd be willing to support you in this journey that you're going through. Set your meetings with that person ahead of time so that everybody knows when it's going to happen. Even just go ahead and book it out for the group watching this now. Book it out a year ahead. Just put the dates in the calendar as to when you'll do it, the last Saturday of the month or something like that. And give the opportunity for your sponsor to ask you more questions as he feels necessary. Note that person's not a counselor. They don't have to fix you, but they should be sensitive to the spirit and dig deeper if they think you're holding back on something. So that is step 1 in a nutshell. Again, it's all about just kind of breaking down these facades, or this image that we've created for ourselves where we think we can control this on our own. It's just, the whole purpose is to break that down out of us and cure us of that false belief. So I wish you all the best on that 12 on that step one journey. And again, we'll be back again in a month to talk about step two. But I will end the recording there. So yeah, I wish you all the best in that.